Okay, have you ever been in one of those conversations? You know, the ones about someone's body that just feel deeply uncomfortable, but you also can't quite look away. What happens when that awkward talk turns into something people are calling an actual war? Well, today, that's where we're going. We're diving deep into this really raw, evolving dialogue, the one often labeled the war on Black women's weight.
Yeah, and our goal here in this deep dive isn't to take sides, but really to explore all the different angles of this very charged conversation, because there are multiple perspectives, right? And what's really striking, especially if you follow body image discussions, is this shift. A huge part of the talk now involves Black women holding other Black women accountable. That's different. It's a kind of internal critique setting community standards, which marks a real change from how these things used to be discussed.
Exactly. And that shift is why this source felt so important. We're looking at a YouTube video transcript, and not just the main points, but also like tons of user comments. It gives you this raw, unfiltered window into the real dialogue. It's a gold mine, honestly, for seeing their genuine, sometimes kind of brutal opinions. So let's start with how the source itself, this YouTube video, frames it all. It really presents this as a conversation happening mostly among women, about the weight of Black women. So it's not just commentary from the outside anymore. It feels like this internal dynamic shifting within the community.
And it's interesting, the video's own host seemed a bit hesitant, actually. They mentioned feeling it was kind of pushing that too much for YouTube line. Found parts of it disturbing even. That hesitation right up front. It tells you just how provocative and potentially controversial this whole thing is.
You feel that tension immediately. Just scroll the comments. You get these really provocative ones like, nah, who snuck the skinny girl in? Or just blunt stuff like, I got diabetes from watching this video. But then right alongside those, you have people praising the women, saying this conversation is needed, it's positive, it's just incredibly divided. Shows you how deep the feelings run on this.
And the host in the source material flat out said very little about this video that was flattering.
Yeah.
They did acknowledge, okay, not everybody has the same preference, fine. But they argued that the guys who prefer bigger women, that number is negligent compared to the large majority, who see the situation more like an epidemic. That really highlights this painful gap between maybe a niche preference and what's perceived as the wider reality. Like, societal desirability is skewed.
Okay, so let's get into some of those uncomfortable stats the source mentions. Black women being cited as the most overweight, and then this claim that Black men, they've apparently given grace for a long time about weight, but now they're openly unhappy. That feels like a real shift in a dynamic that's maybe been around for a while, right?
It really does. And this leads to a huge point the source makes, a really raw one, basically. Just because you can get a man between your legs doesn't mean that you can get that man to want to stay or build a healthy relationship. It just punctures that illusion, that idea that, sex automatically equals long-term desirability or commitment.
Yeah.
And it challenges what maybe a lot of women have been led to believe about their value in a relationship.
Yeah, it hammers that harsh reality home. The source points out this belief some women might hold, that a man having sex with you means something, like specifically you're desirable or attractive. But the video just calls that stupid in 2025, straight up.
Yeah.
And it introduces this idea of being past thick, not just thick, suggesting there's a real difference between a body type some find desirable and one that's maybe unhealthy.
Which then leads to this really sharp observation about men's private actions versus maybe their public preferences. The source says, men ain't complaining because you're still giving it up stupid, but they still ain't telling their homeboys how disgusting they think you look with your clothes off. No. It connects to this thing they call the after midnight phenomenon, where maybe a guy doesn't picture himself with someone who looks like you physically until after midnight, or, doesn't want to be seen in public together. It's a really pointed critique of like superficial engagement.
Yeah, that after midnight thing,
Yep.
It hits hard, doesn't it? You can almost feel the sting for those women in the comments talking about being ghosted, that painful gap between thinking you're desired and what's actually happening. And you see so many other commenters just like avoiding the weight issue entirely, dancing around it when it seems obvious to others.
And this is where the blame starts getting tossed around. The source points a finger right at men, saying they're at fault for this because they lied to y'all and told y'all that y'all was thick when you've been past thick. So it's challenging this idea that men have always been straight up about preferences. It suggests maybe a history of like deliberate misdirection that's had consequences.
And digging even deeper into these really uncomfortable self-perceptions, the source brings up this claim, and it's quite poignant. that some women might actually resist losing weight because they feel their big sloppy butt is like the best thing that you got to offer. That it's the only thing getting them compliments from men. It's a sad take on how outside approval can mess with your self-worth and motivation.
Yeah, and this gets contrasted with what the source sees in other communities. It mentions almond moms, that term for mothers, hyper-focused on their daughter's weight.
Right.
Suggesting they train their daughters from a young age to keep their bodies under control. And the conclusion drawn is pretty stark. There's no war on nobody's weight, because if it was, you'd realize that you've had it easy. It implies vastly different pressures across communities. Like, this struggle isn't felt the same way everywhere.
Okay, so we've gone through the sharp critiques, the personal accountability stuff. But it raises a big question, doesn't it? Is this whole conversation really about health? Or is it, like some argue, just an obsession with thinness dressed up differently?
Well, the counter-argument in the source is interesting. It suggests that if this was truly about health, then a lot more Black women would be more receptive.
Okay.
And the focus would shift, right? It would be about the quality of our food, the quality of our neighborhood, and the access to good, nutritious food, and the quality of our mental health. So that view reframes it less as just individual choice and more about these bigger systemic things affecting well-being.
And you do hear arguments from some women about genetics, about history, too, saying it oversimplifies things, pointing to, slavery times, maybe stockier Black women being more common then, carrying weight differently, different muscle mass, kind of framing current body types as possibly linked to ancestral adaptation survival.
Right. And another recurring point is stress. The argument that stress is a huge factor in weight gain for Black women because of societal demands, systemic pressures.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
But the source we're looking at often just dismisses that as excuses. It kind of links stress back to relationship status or personal choices. Like that line, "I'm a single mom, so you need to go work hard and earn a husband." That dismissal. It really shows a sharp divide in how different factors are weighed when talking accountability.
And then there's this really controversial angle the source brings up, directly blaming racism for Black women obesity. Citing studies, about chronic stress from racism triggering specific stress responses, impacting metabolism, maybe leading to weight gain. It's a complex biological argument, suggesting a deeper systemic cause.
But that idea gets strong pushback in the source material. It's directly rebutted, labeled as, "This level of dodging accountability is almost impressive." And the comments cited are just as blunt. "Denial is a river in Egypt," or "Trauma isn't new, hormonal issues aren't new, the problem is too much calories." So you see this really fierce insistence within the conversation that, look, individual choices, especially diet, are the main thing, regardless of other factors.
So, okay, zooming out. What does this mean for the bigger picture of weight in America? The source hits us with that stat. 74% of Americans overweight, and specifically 62% of Black women obese. And it connects this directly to a calorie surplus. Points to habits that have become kind of normal, maybe too normal, like grabbing a Chipotle bowl in 7 bites, or the Chili's triple dipper, those crumble cookies, each one potentially packing like over 1,000 calories. Paints a pretty stark picture of just everyday overconsumption. But amidst all this back and forth, this blame game, there were these powerful stories emerging, examples of Black women really taking accountability. Like one woman's story in the source, she shared very bravely that her weight wasn't just about food. It was tied up in a savior complex, eating her feelings to cope. She even connected it to money struggles, realizing trading time for money wasn't the smartest thing. Her journey isn't just weight loss, it's this whole transformation. She said she's down 32 pounds and aiming for the healthiest version of mentally, spiritually, physically, financially. It really shows how deep and personal this journey can be.
Yeah, that really brings home the reality of being overweight, described by one woman as just unfun. It hits your knees, your heart, mental health, confidence, even just finding clothes that fit comfortably.
Sure.
And then there's that extra layer, that burden of being talked about online or feeling like you're persecuted. Adds this whole emotional, psychological weight on top of everything else. Makes a tough journey even tougher.
Then there's that study that the source mentioned about how men and women perceive overweight people differently. It found men tend to feel annoyed by fat women, while women find fat men kind of invisible.
Yeah.
That's a pretty stark difference in how genders process appearance and assign value, or maybe lack of value.
And a really provocative takeaway from that study was, even kids know that bad attention is better than not being noticed at all. Which connects right back to the idea that maybe the initial reasons for wanting to lose weight can be highly emotional, superficial reasons,
Hmm.
like proving people wrong or just wanting to be skinny, not necessarily pure health reasons at first, suggests maybe a deeper need for just acknowledgement, even if it starts from a negative place.
The whole Lizzo example fits right in here, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Public perception, authenticity. When she started sharing weight loss advice, she got quite a bit of backlash from her own fans. Comments like, Lizzo, you aren't there yet, or how is Lizzo giving advice out of everyone?
Right.
Really highlights how the messenger matters just as much as the message, especially with something as visible and sensitive as weight.
And this ties into a broader point the source makes. This observation that elite status and physical appearance goes hand in hand. It points out successful people are rarely overweight, suggesting this perceived link between discipline in your career and discipline with your physical self. It's kind of an uncomfortable observation about how society often conflates success with a certain look.
So after digging through all of this, what's the takeaway? We've seen how complex this conversation around Black women's weight is, how contradictory it can be. There's this constant push and pull, right, between self-acceptance, the hard facts about health, and these intense societal pressures coming from outside and increasingly from inside the community.
Exactly. And while it's obviously deeply personal for so many individuals involved, it really does mirror these larger societal issues. Issues around health, body image, accountability, things that stretch way beyond just one community. It's kind of a microcosm, of the struggles lots of people face with health and self-perception in a world just saturated with confusing messages about bodies.
So building on that observation from the source that the first reasons for change are often superficial. Here's something to think about. How might those surface level drivers, wanting to prove someone wrong, wanting to look a certain way, how might they actually end up opening the door, paving the way for a deeper, more meaningful journey towards overall health, towards self-care, that ultimately goes way beyond just seeking validation from others, just something to chew on as you think about your own path to wellness, whatever that looks like for you.